It's about 7:30 on Thursday, April 17th, 2025. I just put the cows and the sheep together. It was a lot of work to keep them separated, and it wasn't quite working. So I'm going to move them over to this new area here. You're going to get to watch the rush of sheep. So let me pull out these posts. There we go. Whoa! There they go. Here goes the cows. She's doing a lot better. So tomorrow my brother's coming down to visit. He would like to buy half of a lamb for Easter. They want to do a lamb roast. The kids like lamb roasts, but they've been buying it at oh gosh, Trader Joe's or something. I don't know where he's buying it from. But he was kind of surprised to find out that the market price of sheep is a lot lower than the grocery store, even on discount. So they'd buy their lamb shanks on discount, or lamb legs. So he's going to buy half a lamb. Let me see if I can find the two that are the candidates for harvest. They've both been castrated, so we're going to bring the sheep down to the pen. There's a pen down there. We'll put them in the pen. I'm going to look at some of the sheep that I wanted to look at, and we're going to separate the wethers, choose which one we want to harvest, and then let the rest go back, and then we'll do the deed. But let's see if I can find them. This might be one of them, right? Nope, that's a female. So one of them has a missing ear. Snowball was the one that attacked that one. And if you're wondering, Snowball's no longer with us. So lots of clovers. It smells like clover here. You can see all that clover just growing like mad, the red clover. I saw some crimson clover in another part of the pasture. But these purple flower heads, that means it's a red clover. That is not one of them. That is probably one of them right there, straight ahead. Let me see how he's doing. Yeah, that's definitely one of them. I can tell because he has a little belly button that's not a belly button. So he's probably the bigger one of the two. And that is the one with the ear. So he has the ear intact. There's another one that's missing an ear. We're not going to harvest these guys. We need them for breeding purposes. So I love the colors at sunset. The grass just seems to turn really green. I don't know if you guys can see it on screen or not, but the grass has turned very green. That's probably him. Yeah, that's him right there. Sorry, let me point to him better. That guy right there. That's definitely him. The belly button, that's not a belly button. Oh no, something's wrong with his front right hoof. I'll take a look. It's probably overgrown hoof or something like that. I don't think the last video did much justice to what I was seeing, but the hooves on Rammy Jr., they look just fine. I think one of his back hooves was a little bit white, but if that is hoof scald, which it probably isn't, but if it is, it's the very early stages of it. He didn't seem tender there. So but I'm definitely going to catch that one and look at his hoof, see what's going on there. So yeah, tomorrow morning I'll move them to the last section. They're in the 6th of 7 sections on this row. For you math nerds out there, the rows are 1,000 feet long and then 100 feet wide. And so take 1,000 divided by 7. I think that's about 140 something. So each of these paddocks is about 140 feet by 100 feet, so 14,000 feet, which I think works out to be like 2/3 of an acre or something, if I remember the math right. Let me see. So I'm doing 200 feet a week. So that's about 12 weeks. Yeah, so each paddock I think is around half an acre, right? So, and this is by no means how bold it's going to be growing here as we progress in spring. There's going to be a lot more grass. But just look at all this clover. My goodness. I did want to talk about this topic. I don't know that everybody that saw the video where I mentioned it really understood what I was trying to say. So we have this tribal knowledge that if we give the sheep a certain medicine, an antibiotic, particular kind of antibiotic, that it will cure the sheep of hoof rot and hoof scald, right? That's the claim. And I don't want to talk about that specific claim. I want to talk about claims in general that people make. And when we studied physics, we're kind of spoiled in physics because of the nature of the thing we're testing. Like, there's no ethical dilemmas with testing to see how fast weights fall off of a tower, right? As long as nobody gets hurt, nobody's property gets damaged, it's not an ethical dilemma. So we don't have to really worry about that much. There are some things, obviously, that we have to be concerned about that are probably not ethical to experiment with, like how much radiation can somebody handle before they get sick. You make a claim, and then you need evidence to support that claim if you want to be like rational and empirical and all that kind of stuff. So you need some kind of experiment that has been performed in the past that suggests the relationship between the two things, saying that if we administer such and such a drug to the animals, then such and such a disease disappears, right? So there's you need to have some way of measuring, like whether or not they've received the medicine or whether or not they have the disease. You need some kind of objective way to measure that. You need to try your best to control for other variables. And there's ways to do that even if you can't control the environment, right? So, for instance, I might have 2 flocks of sheep in the same pasture, and one flock I administer the medicine to, the other flock I don't, right? And it could be the case that one of the flocks is just better than the other flock. And so I wasn't really testing that the medicine works or not. I just discovered the fact that one of the flocks is stronger than the other, that kind of thing. So you want to look for other variables that could correlate, right? And another thing to consider is what is it called? False correlation. So oftentimes when you do an experiment, there's random chance that something happens or the other happens, regardless of the variables. And sometimes you get cases where it looks like the thing you did helped, but really all that happened is you just got really lucky when you administered the medicine and got really unlucky when you didn't, right? And so that's another thing that you have to consider, is that maybe just by roll of the dice, you happen to think that there's a relationship, but there's not, right? So that's another thing to consider. And things like that, and a lot of the things you can't really control. You can do your best, take random samples of a population and put them into a control group, or do A/B testing where one gets one drug and the other gets the other drug. But it really all comes down to trying to be as objective as possible and thinking hard about the null hypothesis. And what the null hypothesis is the idea that nothing is actually related with each other, that the medicine doesn't actually do anything. It's just random chance whether or not the sheep recovers, right? Now, if you read, Robert Bacon, he talked a lot about, he was one of the early founders of science. What he noticed, if you read his book, I forget which book it was, but if you read his book, he talks about how people lie, and they have all kinds of reasons to lie. And one of the reasons they might lie is they have an economic interest in people believing one way or the other, right? Now, one of the problems we have in agriculture is that there is a party that, creates and sells these drugs and these things, and they obviously want to show that their medicine works, and you need to buy their medicine. And if you don't buy their medicine, your animals are all going to die, right? And what that means is that you can't trust anything they say. You have to find some other way of verifying their facts than trusting what they say. So if they were to fund a study, or if they were to publish a report, you basically have to throw it out and say, I can't consider that because you're highly biased, right? Now, if there's some way to remove that bias, like for instance, let's say the drug manufacturer published a report saying that their drug is absolutely not indicated for a particular disease. The chances that that's actually true, or that they're being honest, is much higher because it's against their interest, right? So they're saying, don't buy this drug, don't use it, right? And that's a sign that they're probably being more honest than if they're saying use a drug. And then there's political things at play, red versus blue. I want my team to win the next election, and so I'm going to say whatever I can say to help my guy win, right? And that's one of the things that I really like about Trump appointing RFK Jr. To the USDA or whatever it is, the FDA. I forget which he's appointed to. But by doing that, he took somebody from the blue team, somebody that has no reason to be on the red team. Like the red team doesn't really align with his values and what he's talking about. But Trump took him onto his team and put him in a position of authority. And so that means that to some degree you can trust him more than the other people on the red team, right? There's a reason why Trump looked at him and said, he's the guy that I want doing this. Now obviously there may be ulterior motives, like he might not be part of team red, but maybe there's a secret team purple and a team yellow, and Trump has him on team purple, and then some of the reds are on yellow and some of the blues are on yellow, that kind of thing. So you can't really uncover everybody's how they're all combined together. So it's not really an effective way to determine whether there's truth there or not. So at the end of the day, what you have to do is you have to get raw data, okay? And it has to be raw data that hasn't been messed with, right? So everybody that's ever studied this should publish their results to the entire world. And you should be able to find all of their studies, everything that anybody's ever done, experimentation-wise, right? And not like take the studies that didn't have a favorable result and throw them out and ignore them, or only take studies from the U.S. and ignore studies from New Zealand and stuff like that, right? So that's not an easy thing to do, and there's lots of people guilty of massaging the results by not including things that they don't want to include, right? Ultimately, at the end of the day, you have to run your own experiment so you can know for yourself what the truth is, right? And that's just the unfortunate reality. Now, my system, what I'm doing is I'm just checking to see what the base behavior is. What happens if we don't use antibiotics? What happens if we don't do the thing that most people are doing, especially the things that they're paying money to people to do, right? I really am looking for a way, like if I could have a baseline, like I do this for 20 years with no antibiotics, and then I have a baseline of what happens if I don't use antibiotics, and probably after 20 years I can pretty much safely assume that whatever side effects from the antibiotics are pretty much gone, and then from there I can introduce the antibiotics in a control group, like take one of my pastures and section it off and say, okay, these guys are the ones that are going to get antibiotics, and you can do an experiment that way. You kind of notice that there's a problem there, right? We're talking of very long time frames. Like by the time I actually have a data where I can make a definitive statement one way or the other, we're all going to be old, right? I might be retired and not doing this anymore, right? And that's just an issue. That's not really something you can easily get over, right? So, I mean, with physics, it's kind of nice because we can build a lot of machines, or we can run thousands of experiments, millions. In the case of particle physics, we can do billions of experiments, right? But you just can't do that with animals, right? All of this to say, ultimately, that if people are making claims of truth and that they have some form of evidence, that they're probably deluding themselves in this industry, right? Even the guys that are doing rotational grazing and regenerative, right? At the end of the day, if you dig through their data, you're not going to find like overwhelming evidence that forces everybody of one opinion or the other to agree, right? You're not going to find it. It's just impossible to get that data. We have a belief, we have an idea, we have a suggestion, and we're willing to stake some of our money and time and efforts on it. And, I think there's a market for this stuff, even if there is no evidence that it's good, right? I think there's people out there that are willing to buy animals that haven't had antibiotics, that have been grazed on land that hasn't seen antibiotics, and that are treated more naturally. Now, obviously, I don't think people understand what that means. When you see a sick animal, you want to help, but sometimes there's things that I can't do, because I made that decision. So, and that's kind of the long and the short of it. Ultimately, at the end of the day, I'm going to be relying on rotational grazing and genetics. I'm going to cull the animals that don't perform well. At best, they'll end up at the sale barn, kind of with the disclaimer saying, these are animals that did not perform well on my farm. If you think you can do well with them, go ahead and buy them and do something with them, but I don't recommend these animals. And sometimes the animals get culled naturally, and that's a euphemism for something that people don't like to talk about, right? But at the end of the day, we really can't know. We're just guessing. We're all guessing. And the philosophy that I adhere to is that nature understands what she's doing. And my job isn't to fight nature, tell her she's wrong, and try to find ways to twist nature to conform with my expectations of what reality should be. Instead, what I'm trying to do is adapt my behavior to match what nature would naturally do, right? And so I'm going to find some things that I can do that are pretty easy, they don't require excessive effort, and at the same time that are productive and profitable. So that's the long and the short of the story. You guys have a great day. I hope this makes sense. I'm not trying to make claims one way or the other about whether antibiotics work. I'm just saying that we can't know. Guys, have a great day. Take care and bye-bye.